model looked you up, found your social security number, found your bank account balance, and bank account. You as a consumer gave the model a very simple prompt and generated like 25 queries based on your prompt. You have no idea. It could be anything. Like hallucination every year, it's going to get 10% better, 20% better. What does it look like when my law firm is AI native from the outset?
This episode is brought to you by Impekable, your trusted partner for building enterprise-ready, AI-powered customer experiences. From retrieval-augmented generation to custom agent workflows, we help companies ship real AI products, fast. Whether you're leveraging Microsoft Azure, Twilio, or OpenAI, we turn ideas into production-ready tools. Learn more at impeccable.com. Now let's dive into today's conversation with Vinod Valloppillil from Microsoft.
Hello. Today on Impekable Minds podcast, I'm thrilled to welcome Vinod Valloppillil. He is the partner at Microsoft within the Azure AI in charge of knowledge and specialized models. He's former head of product of Google Cloud AI app platforms, formerly of Dropbox, product manager of machine intelligence, and VP of product at Roundbox, which was acquired by QuickPlay Media. Welcome to the show.
That's going back quite a while.
Yeah.
Well over a decade there. Yeah.
I didn't even mention Clementine, which is how we met. Okay, let's just start it off with your current role. In one sentence, how would you explain Azure AI Search to a non-technical exec, and how is that better compared to the old models of search, enterprise
Sure.
search?
Yeah, and I mean, the area that I own all of our knowledge systems inside of Azure AI and then a lot of the specialized tools. The way I'd frame it all is, the next wave of AI is agents. You can't go anywhere without people talking about software agents and the need for agents. And what I provide is two of the most important supporting functions to an agent. The first is access to private enterprise data of different sorts. And there are differences in the ways that agents use tools like search versus the way consumers or end users use search. So that's exploring that domain is a big part of my job. And then the second big area is tool usage. There's a lot of reasons why, for example, even though your base model might understand speech pretty well, you might sometimes want a specialized speech model in front of it, either to overlay enterprise voices or check for custom pronunciation. And the same is true for translation, speech, different language services, and so on.
Makes sense. A specialized model for, even in my own practice, people ask for recommendations. It's like, well, it depends on what you want to do. My answer is, if you want to generate images, yeah, you can get away with some crappy images on ChatGPT, but you want a dedicated image model or dedicated video models.
Yeah, and then Microsoft, in my corner of Microsoft, it's very large scale enterprise customers, right? It's one of the biggest enterprises on the planet. And so there's a lot of things that you could do with a large generalist model like GPT-4o, but the second you start trying to do that at scale, right? The second you start thinking in terms of thousands of usages or millions of usages per day, a lot of the advantages of focused specialist models, cost, speed, latency, accuracy, and so on, start to accumulate.
And then instead of paying per token, you're owning your own models. And is that
and then when you get to private models and a model that you own by yourself or running locally, it's a whole other equation as well.
You mentioned tools, and when I think of tools in the age of agentic AI, the buzz is all about MCP servers. What is your take on that?
We're big on MCP servers. I mean, it's at the lowest level, MCP is a very simple protocol. I mean, it's the analogy people often use is basically HTTP. Like if the original HTTP specification was like 10 pages long. HTTP 1.1 was like 200 pages long. But if you look at what do people actually use HTTP for, a kind of a well understood pattern for how to establish a pipe to a server and start pulling documents down from that server. MCP is not that far from that. It's a set of conventions for how do you connect to an MCP server, how do you get that server to describe what it provides to you, and then a little bit of detail on each of the different interfaces that server is providing. And then the assumption is that it's just connecting text or connecting documents going back and forth at that point. Whereas a lot of classic traditional client-server protocols where we got really deep and nitty gritty in terms of defining the interfaces. Expect a Boolean followed by a real, followed by a string, followed by another Boolean. In MCP, all that stuff's kind of left up to the model or left up to the consumer and the server on either side. You're just saying, send a query to this server, and that server is going to respond with the address of a place, and it's up to the receiving client or up to the receiving model to be like, oh, in this case, it's giving me the result in the form of a lat long. The next time I called it, it gave me the result in the form of a fully qualified address. The next time it gave it to me in the form of an apartment building somewhere in Manhattan. Right. And so all those variations of what are the input formats and the output formats and so on, MCP just sidesteps, right? It just says, look, we're just going to trust the model and trust the server to deal with that. And then we're going to define a very simple communications and discovery protocol in between the two.
It can be very non-deterministic if you don't
Extremely.
provide good prompts. With the large enterprises, without naming any names and being very hyper-specific because of NDAs, potentially, what are some of the most interesting use cases you've seen that even
Sure.
surprised you?
I will say, like, the things that we're seeing like a lot of adoption around. I mean, there's still a lot of generation 1, generation 2 AI workflows. Like literally things like document processing, or go through all my social media and find all the negative reviews, tell me what those negative reviews were about. This is stuff that people have been talking about for 8 to 10 years and stuff. Literally the earliest dawn of AI kind of stuff. People have been talking about this kind of stuff. And so in the previous generations of AI, the stuff either didn't work very well, or was really expensive, or there were too many corner cases. Now, generative AI, you do have a much more robust solution for a lot of these classic use cases. Another one that we see a ton of is all forms of document processing. I mean, I think there was a report that just went out recently talking about how there's like 200 or 300 different document processing startups out there. When you go to YC, if you don't have a document processing startup in your batch, is it really a batch? Right? It's just such a common thing. And that's because what's new or what's different now is that so many of the old forms of document processing were predicated on how do you take a document that in its native form is a very visually rich medium, graphs and charts and infographics. And in the old school, you used to take that very natively rich medium and try to down level it down to text so that you can now process it. With LLMs and Omni models in particular, you now have the ability to just kind of process it natively in that visual domain. And so, a lot of the stuff that gets lost in translation when you're translating something from visual to text is now still there. Right? You still have an opportunity to go and attack that. And so maybe that's the second one. Maybe a third one that we see a ton of, and I'd say, specifically since ChatGPT, everybody's doing a chatbot for something or another. And so there's still a lot of war, a lot of questions out there about whether it's going to be like one giant chatbot to rule them all or hundreds of specialist chatbots. But I mean, every vertical you can imagine has some chatbot that helps you figure out auto parts or search an e-commerce catalog or answer maintenance questions. And so that part of the market is extremely dynamic. I mean, once again, every week there's a startup or a company talking about their solution for that problem.
How do you feel about chat or chat bots as an interface to stuff like that?
I go back and forth. I've been around, and somebody was saying it's like kind of going back to DOS. For whatever set of reasons, people really like it. I can answer it in both directions. Like from a consumer user standpoint, the advantage of chat and the advantage of voice is that it really is true that most people can speak a lot faster than they can type, and then they can just kind of give you a big ambiguous paragraph-long chat description of what they think they want to do, and they leave it up to the LLM to parse that and turn that into a more precise definition of like, oh, it appears that you're asking me about A, B, and C, and then answer. And so the flexibility and the intuitiveness and the speed of chat is something that resonates with a very broad market. It's not unlike the flexibility and speed and breadth of Google search, right? Like a single search box gave you the world. I think there's a similar parallel here. And so that's kind of the optimistic case for chat. The pessimistic case for chat is there's a lot more to the human experience, especially with your background, Peck. There's a lot more to the human experience around visual spatial design and a lot of information that gets conveyed only in this kind of visual medium. I don't know. I think there's a lot of the jury's still out. Like people are still kind of researching and investigating what are these hybrid interfaces where it's a combo of chat plus a chart, or maybe there's two windows next to each other and you chat in one window and the answer gets rendered in the other window. Jury's still out. We'll see where that goes.
Yeah. For image type workflows, I find chat is extremely difficult. So if you're trying to edit an image where it's like, just remove this or just move this over here, trying to describe it, and then you're just wasting a lot of tokens. So I think it's not the best modality for specific use cases. I can't imagine doing CAD design via chat or things like that.
Yeah, the precision, what you lose in precision, you gain in friendliness and approachability. So, and so if you're a professional in the environment, then you want the precision that comes from really moving your mouse cursor in there and going pixel by pixel.
Yeah. You've been in AI. If you go back in time, I worked at Accenture Labs, and I don't think we ever used the word AI. And many years ago, I built a movie recommendation engine for you like this genre, you like this actor, you like this type of 80s action flicks, those vector databases. We never called it AI, but we've been in this for a while. What was your Gen AI aha moment?
Oh, geez. I think the Gen AI aha moment for me, because I've been through a couple generations of AI at this point. The classic one for me, one of the big ahas was, and I think it's not just my aha, right? This is in some ways like the central aha that OpenAI had like 3 or 4 years ago. Was that a lot of old school AI recommendation systems, classifiers, all that stuff. A lot of old school AI, the workflow as a developer or somebody building product in that category was, okay, first go get 1,000 images of cats and dogs. Now go label those images of cats and dogs. Now build a model that can understand cats or dogs. Now give it an image and ask it if this is a cat. And there's a precision to that. It's still a faster, cheaper workflow for certain. If you really know that's what you're going to be doing. The big aha and the mind blowing insight that OpenAI et al. Had was what you can instead do is say, screw that. I'm going to go train a model on all the data I can get on the internet. And in the process of training that model on every single stupid thing on the internet, along the way, it starts learning the difference between cats and dogs. And so now I can tap into that latent knowledge about the difference between cats and dogs with just a simple prompt. And so they do all this work up front, like crazy billions of dollars of training on this big general purpose model. And then my specific task can be unlocked with like 5-line text prompt. And then, oh my God, it worked. And then second aha is like, that's just one task, right? It can do zillions of other tasks, and we're learning, constantly discovering new tasks that the previously trained model can do. And so it's maybe a little nerdy, but the notion that like, screw it all, I'm going to teach a model about the world and then figure out what tasks it can accomplish afterwards was a big, earth-shattering moment for the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the enterprise customers, what keeps customers up at night regarding AI? What are they worried about?
There's so many things. I mean, there's like kind of near term and long term. Like what we see on the near term stuff for customers, it is all the stuff that people talk about. Like the classic stuff is like hallucination, reliability. Am I actually doing this thing correctly? Do I have the right skill set to start my firm? Now that I've started going down this path, how do I do things differently? And so that set of concerns is very tactical. Like it's basically my board of directors or my CEO is telling me I need to go off and do something with AI. Okay, what do I do? Okay, I'm trying it and it works instead of POC, but does it actually work in production? Those are the short-term things. The long-term thing, and the thing that I think is terrifying / opportunity for everybody is just like it is just like when the internet and mobile and all these things started happening. There was a line of thought that was, okay, we're going to use mobile phones to make the taxi industry more efficient. And then there was actually the other line of thought, which is, no, I'm going to build a mobile native version of taxis and call it Uber. And I think that dynamic, that play is still coming down the pipe for a lot of a lot of industries who are grappling with AI. Is like, we're still in that mode of make my existing industry more efficient. But what does it happen? What does it look like when my law firm, for example, is AI native from the outset? And then if you really want to go for a head spin, it's like, what happens when we start getting robotics and these other things start happening, right? What does an AI native or robot native auto manufacturer look like?
Yeah, there are already factories that operate with very little, and warehouses that operate with very little humans, and some I've heard can operate.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon had a headline like earlier this week, I think, where they're talking about how they now have more robots employed than people.
Yeah, employed. That's a funny word. Cow robots. Yeah. AGI. What's your thought on that?
It's tough. You probably saw Sam Altman had a paper that he wrote out like 2 weeks ago. And he's arguing that in some ways it's already here. Like it's basically, it's such a nebulous thing. I think people have like hard AGI. They have like the scary Terminator vision of AGI. That thing's super far away. And there's a lot of good technical reasons why training LLMs and training bigger models, and even LLMs plus RL might not get you to the point of AGI. And there's a lot of arguments about like, is this stuff just pattern matching on steroids? But is it actually inducting? Is it actually learning getting new insights about the world? TBD. And so the Sam Altman argument was basically, in the meantime, there's actually stuff you can do that looks like AGI. It's similar to the classic analogy people always use. Just because calculators can do every math problem on the planet better than you can, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, way better than you can, it doesn't mean that we as humans stop doing those things. And it doesn't mean that the calculator is going to take over the world and start ordering us around. Right. At the end of the day, we're still the ones solving the problem and on the hook for ensuring that problem's solved. And the calculator simply becomes a tool. And so to the extent that the calculator is AGI for addition or AGI for subtraction, maybe we're already there with, with GPT and Grok and so on, where we've got access to the entire world's knowledge one prompt away. Okay, great. Now what are you going to do with it?
Yeah. It could be argued some people were also just pattern matchers as well. So
I do think, I don't know. I am optimistic that humans are doing a lot more inductive reasoning and learning, learning and inferring new structures about the world. We'll see.
what's the biggest misconception about AI that big enterprises have?
Oh, geez, interesting. No, that's a tough one. I mean, I think AGI is definitely one of the ones. Is one of them. Is like, hey, how close are we actually to this thing? I personally think we're pretty far. I think this is maybe, I don't know, this is like an Andre Karpathy thing, is like, because an AI can solve something in a demo environment one time doesn't mean it can solve it in a production environment a million times. I was talking about like a lot of these old school workflows like documents. And one of the things that happens classically with document processing is, yeah, the AI can handle 90% of these cases great. And we should use it for those 90% of the cases. But people radically underestimate how much energy and time and cost it takes to resolve those 10%. There's the cost of detecting and finding those 10% of problems, and there's the actual cost of resolving those problems, and then there's the cost of, if you let one of those slip through, what happened. And so those costs associated with exception handling and error detection with AI is shockingly expensive in some cases.
Yeah, kind of like that Pareto principle. It's easy to get do the 20% that gets the 80%, and then 20% that's left is like so much effort.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll give you the optimistic version of that. Is like, at the dawn of self-driving, the fear was you could make the case for why self-driving was going to be safer than humans, but the problem was, what everybody feared was that the liability of a accident created by self-driving would be 10x the accident created by humans. And so even if self-driving, reduced accident rates by 90%, it would still cost the vendor, the developer of self-driving, the same as if it was just like a regular car.
Right.
The good news is, at least initially, if you buy the Tesla Waymo numbers, it's more like self-driving is like 98% safer than humans, not just 90% safer. And so maybe it all works out.
Yeah, the cases where they fail are very unhuman like. It's from what I've heard.
Dieter jumping in front of it and trying to do stuff.
How do organizations decide whether a AI project or initiative is going to be worth it compared to, say, old-fashioned, maybe, if you're doing with search, old-fashioned text search or old-fashioned document processing?
Yeah. The good news is I do think, like, especially a lot of these back office use cases, enterprises have a very firm, especially, and the larger the enterprise becomes, the more granular understanding they have of the cost. And this is like a classic technology diffusion thing. The easiest place to build the ROI calculation is for these painkiller use cases where I can quantify the pain and know, hey, it cost me $1,000 to process a mortgage. If I use AI, I can get it down to $200 to process a mortgage. Ergo, I'm willing to pay some percentage of that $800 to the AI that helped me process the mortgage. There's a lot of competitive dynamics. Like, you're not going to just give all 800, but it's obvious where that margin comes from, right? If you're the enterprise. The vitamin use cases are the ones that are always much harder. So things like end user search, there it ends up being a lot more bottoms up adoption. So it's like, as a consumer, I am used to using ChatGPT to solve all these random problems or answer all these random questions. Why don't I have it in my enterprise? Let me keep bugging IT, or let me go figure out how to do it on my own and bring it in. And so in that one, the classic problem is it's a lot harder to justify the $10 a month, $20 a month inside of my enterprise for that. However, at a consumer level, you just start demanding it.
For my own benefit and edification, based on your experience, how much of the $800 can an AI company capture?
That's a good question. A number I've seen, numbers I've seen in the past is like, if it's something like 10 to 20%. Like, if I'm a tool that saves my customer $100, I have an opportunity to charge something like $10 for that tool. And then the other 90% that goes in a couple places. Obviously, a lot of this goes straight to the customer. They pocket the surplus, they pocket the difference. But then they also get a premium. When you're negotiating it with this customer, you're saying, hey, I'm going to save you 100, I'm going to charge you 10, and that part of that 90 is the customer benefit for taking the risk. Right, the customer, because it's up to the customer is going to screw up his mortgage processing for some period of time, or while he's trying the AI solution. And so the risk premium goes entirely to the customer. And so they're able to, that's part of why you see something like 90% of the gain go to the customer. It still varies. There's a lot of other hard costs in there as well.
Yeah.
Quick break. If Vinod's take on enterprise AI or specialized models is lighting a fire, let's talk. At Impekable, we've helped businesses build actual AI systems, from secure RAG deployments on Azure to AI voice agents using Twilio and Google Cloud. Whether you're prototyping or scaling globally, we know the path. Visit impeccable.com to see what's possible for your team.
Enterprise and hallucinations.
Oh, like is it a thing or does it happen a
Well,
lot?
what,
Yes.
tell me more. Like, just that's the prompt.
Yeah, it goes back to these very operational use cases. Like at least the early things that enterprises are using, it is variations of search. And so I'm asking the AI to for a question about something in my corpus of documents, like, hey, do I have any invoices that are more than 10 years old? And so the AI it'll find them for you faster than you could probably find them yourself. It won't give you a perfect answer. It's likely to miss one or two of these invoices that are more than 10 years old, but it'll give you very quickly the answer to whether or not I have mortgages or whether or not I have invoices that are that old. I don't know. I think people have, it's like search. I mean, it's like Google search, right? Like when you use Google search, you're not expecting precise. You know that there's things that didn't fit in those top 10 search results and so on. But you still find Google very valuable, and your behavior accommodates the fact that there's a lot more to the universe than those top 10 link results. Right? I don't know. I think that's maybe maybe one other thing is like for the enterprise. The good news also, I do think this is hallucinations and and faithfulness, like fidelity to the source material. This is literally one of the biggest research topics in AI right now. I mean, there's just like brilliant researchers doing everything they can to figure out how to make this problem. It doesn't entirely go away. It doesn't go to zero because it's inherent in some cases to the way generative AI works. But it's going to go way down. People are training models to be more faithful to retrieved documents, for example, and search results than they have been in the past.
Well, I think people's memory is fuzzy.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
AI and security and CISOs and chief security officers and IT security.
There's a lot of exposure, unfortunately. The biggest one, and this is one that we're still, I think the industry hasn't completely gotten its arms around, is still, at the end of the day, the AI at a certain level, like a model is basically just a summary of the training data it was built on. So obviously you're putting a lot of trust and you're putting a lot of faith in this AI when you ask questions and you ask for medical advice. But for you, the user, it's a black box. Like you have no idea what random latent piece of poisoned data might have been in the training data set that was in the AI years ago. And we know there are literally factually incorrect answers. There's a whole category of these training data set security issues that people have discovered over the years. Factual incorrectness is one. Another one is like all variations of PII. I think it was in GPT 2.0, maybe in GPT 2, but there were definitely like people in GPT 2 where you could just ask GPT like, hey, what's PEC's address? And it actually kind of knew, and it would kind of just give it to you, and not because it was doing a web search or whatever, but it's just because somewhere on some old Usenet group or something like that, you posted that, and it added it to its training data set, and now it's memorized PII data. And so there's a whole category of these problems that stems from the fact that the model itself is a black box, and that you are betting your business process on the data the model was trained on. The good news is I do think society perceived showstopper issue a couple of years ago. I think people are kind of have come around to that now, and just like you accept on Google. That Google is going to be doing a lot of things to massage search results for you. Things like RAG and things like searches, you're getting a lot more dynamic behavior out of the model, and so the model making API calls or the model making search calls and so on, calls out to the internet. And so you can imagine, especially with agentic behavior, where the model, you as a consumer, you gave the model a very simple prompt. The model then went through and generated like 25 queries based on your prompt and plus whatever else it might have known about you. Those 25 queries, you have no idea, but it could be anything that was baked into that query. Like you could have asked the model, hey, how much should I be saving for retirement? And the model looked you up, found your social security number, found your bank account balance, and then it sent a Google query and said, hey, if user Bob with this social security number and this bank account is trying to save for retirement, what should he do? Or something like that, and it gets a response back. And so that cluster of data that was part of your PII as far as the model was concerned became part of this tool or API call, right? And it was in this really weird way where the chain is just not visible to you. And so it's all, once again, this problem exists today with like just classic enterprise software, classic SaaS. It's just that with AI, you've literally accelerated 25x, right? Like it's a single question from you triggers 25 out to other people.
That's the topic that maybe in my mind, the prompt or the word was like observability and audit logs. and reasoning, like how did it arrive to this stuff, and whether it's hallucinations or PII, and what's going on in there because it's such a black box. How's that being handled on the enterprise level?
For most enterprises today, I think they're still in they're either focusing the AI on very tightly defined problems, like these operational back office problems. Once again, there's billions of dollars being spent there, or on these exploratory problems where there's a very defined human in the loop. It's a customer. It's one of their employees is the front line of evaluating and trusting and deciding whether or not to incorporate the AI response into actual workflow. You see this like the high flyers. Everyone talks about like Harvey AI and legal and so on, right? Like these things are, and Microsoft deliberately brand this stuff and package this stuff as a co-pilot. It's not autopilot. It's not the AI going off and filing your taxes for you or something like that. It's the AI suggesting data for you. And then you're still the primary human in the loop.
Copilots in browsers, agentic, very heavy browser-based stuff. Thoughts on that? Opinions on that?
I think it's all up in the air. I know that's why it's exciting to be in the industry right now. It's like God only knows. There's definitely, I think both Perplexity certainly. I think OpenAI rumored. There's a lot of exploration going on into what is the next generation of browsing looks like, where AI is an integral part of it. Especially you and I have been through a couple waves of the web and mobile. This was the same set of things people were trying to figure out back in the day. There was the original browsers. There was a discussion or a debate about whether password managers were going to be something separate from the browser or not. Most people now, a password manager is part of your browser. There was a big debate about whether e-commerce wallets would be part of the browser or not. Coinbase and people like that are clearly not part of the wallet. Credit card number is part of the wallet, so that one's kind of maybe gone 50. It's hard to say. I mean, certainly if you look at where the device players are going, iPhone and Android, the assistants are part of the device operating system, Siri and then Gemini, as opposed to being part of the browser. So at least there you see that direction. It's hard to say. I think there's just going to be a lot of exploration on both sides of the equation.
Yeah. Huge advantage if you own the OS platform.
This is I would say huge advantage. I think this is Zuckerberg's like big thesis is like, is that maybe there's going to be one ginormous assistant, Siri or Alexa type assistant, that's going to be the new primary software interface for most normal people. And he's scrambling hard, fighting hard to make sure that Facebook is a provider of that universal assistant.
Too bad the Facebook phone never took off.
Yeah, totally. But I think that's it. I think if you piece together, I'm guessing here, but like if you piece together a lot of his other statements, is like he's annoyed that 20% or 30% of everything that all the money he makes on an iPhone goes straight to Apple. And at the same time, Apple is like constraining what he's allowed to do, not allowed to do. And so I think if a new platform is about to be born in the form of an AI assistant, he's going to just scramble and do everything he can to make sure that he's a provider of that platform rather than be downstream of that platform.
How do you use AI personally and professionally?
I've been dabbling with vibe coding a lot more within work and stuff like that. I've certainly not shipped anything vibe coded yet, but there definitely are some engineers playing with around. It is amazing. If you haven't coded in a while, like half the battle of coding is just like relearning how to set up your environment, relearning the syntax and all that stuff. And so vibe gets you that first 2/3 of the way so fast, right? It's kind of amazing. But at the same time, you still need to know a lot to get from toy to something that kind of works. You still have to know a fair amount. And so at least in a work setting, that's probably the most direct one. Outside of work, all the standard tools, Google Search and Google Maps are just, they are dozens of AI models under the covers. You don't realize maybe how much AI you're using when you're using Google Maps and Google Search and so on.
Favorite AI tools?
I am a regular user of the Spotify DJ, DJX.
I have to give that a shot.
Again, all the coding assistants are a big deal. I think it'll be interesting to see how that goes, how that plays out. I definitely am a big user. I'm sure if you tracked my daily active usage of GPT, etc., that's growing weekly. It's like I find it very good for like factual and comparison type queries, like, hey, compare and contrast Dropbox versus Box's revenue growth rate, and let it go off and do the 20 queries, pull the data back, and then chart it out for me. And so those types of queries are things that in the past would have been such a pain that I just didn't even want to deal with it. And now it's so easy, free, cheap. I can just throw it out there and glance at it and be like, yeah, that doesn't make sense, or, oh, that's actually pretty good. And so the ability to just like do speculative AI, speculative queries has gone way up.
In terms of AI adoption and enterprise, what's that like?
I think it's nearly 100%. Like I think every
Wow.
enterprise, it depends on what you mean, how you define adoption, but every enterprise of any size now has people who are actually using AI. They're either using it in the back office for, once again, like these automation style tasks, or they're using it in the front office, like just like literally frontline employees using ChatGPT or using search and stuff like that just to get their job done. So, I don't know. I think it's not that far from mobile phones, right? Even before enterprises had official mobile phone strategies, every enterprise, half the employee base was already bringing their phone into work and using their phone for work email. I mean, AI in the enterprise is on that same trajectory, but faster.
What's a gap that maybe, say, Microsoft, Google, maybe it's too small because the market, they're going after really big things, but what's a frustration for the small startup listeners who are like, okay, what's the opportunity here?
I mean, I think like the classic startup advantage, and I've gone back and forth between big companies, small companies. So the classic startup advantage is speed and focus. There's no question that to do feature X at Microsoft, I personally have to go through like many more rounds of review and all that kind of good stuff to make it happen, to ship it. Whereas a startup with a vibe coding tool, especially, a guy can just like dream it up and try it that night and then see if something's worthwhile or not, and then decide if he wants to invest in real productionizing of it. And so the work that it takes me inside of a big company to prototype something is not that much less than the work it might take a startup to just say, screw it, we're going to try, build, throw it against the wall, see what sticks.
Right.
I mean, there are real, especially in this world, right? There are real reasons why startups exist and why they have real deep advantages relative to big companies. And the big company advantage is also there, of course, too. Like I think one of the big company things that I think people really grossly underestimate is data gravity, which is basically, and I think enterprises, if anything, are getting more and more data gravity conscious. Which is that basically, they increasingly realize that the data they generate is literally their number one asset. And so a lot of SaaS companies, Salesforce is kind of the classic villain in this case, but a lot of SaaS companies start with the premise of, I'm going to go deploy my SaaS, customers are going to upload their data into my system. I'm now the system of record. And now I get to charge a toll for any other app and any other system and even any other users at that customer who want access to this data that's inside of my system of record. There's a lot of enterprise backlash to that. And I think they've kind of learned their lesson. And so the idea of data gravity in a very broad sense, that they're going to put all their data in a data lake, probably inside of Microsoft Data Lake or Amazon or something like that, inside of a data lake, and that the MO is going to become, no, I'm going to give your AI agent or your AI tool very metered access to my data for one little narrow window of time. And as soon as you're done, I'm shutting you off. That process is, I don't know, I mean, just every quarter, you're just getting more enterprises kind of behaving that way when it comes to the relationship between their data and like these network of startups and vendors that are trying to provide them apps. And so that stuff, unfortunately, for better and worse, it has, definitely biases towards mega platform providers, right? The people who actually provide your lake, as opposed to startups. Both are true. The flip side, if you've got an app that's so compelling and it saves them that much money, they'll arm wrestle the CISO and be like, look, no, I want, Harvey is so valuable to my law firm that it's worth it for me to allow Harvey to get access to my data, or for me to upload data to Harvey and whatever. And so, I mean, I can only imagine somewhere somebody manages to see some version of all the queries go to ChatGPT. If you were to data mine the queries to go to ChatGPT, it'd be crazy stuff.
AI stuff. Yeah.
Oh, it'd be insane, right? Like governmental users and like military users, police users. There's going to be insane stuff.
I've heard similar stories where, we're not allowed to use it. So I use it on my personal, and it's like they just circumvent it, and it's, insane.
Yeah. And, and once again, all this stuff is true of Google back in the day too. Like, even now, I guarantee that, I mean, Google has a lot of internal checks and balances on this stuff, but if somebody were to get raw access to the Google query stream and just data mine that, you would probably see some amazing stuff, credit card numbers and whatever go by.
Yeah. The PII stuff, maybe 20 minutes ago, what one thought I had was related to Microsoft is just Microsoft license keys. I've heard the story where you can just ask for license keys.
I think GitHub has clamped down, but I mean, there used to be a thing on GitHub where you see API keys all over the place at GitHub because people are just uploading their code, and somewhere in there, there's an
And it's
API key to
public.
their AWS instance or something. And
they do a good job of alerting you now, and it kind
Yeah.
of clamping down onto that. Yeah, it's their workflow is pretty good. What's after AI agents? What do you think is beyond that?
The standard joke is that you have to ask the agent. The next round is basically whatever the AGI or whatever the AI wants. Like I said, I do think there are some intrinsic things that people are trying to solve and figure out inside of agents. Like, once again, the data problems are a big one. 90% of what you want the agent to do is solve problems using either you or your enterprise's data. And so the interface between an agent and the knowledge is a big investment stream. I think we were talking about UX a little bit ago, but I think that's true too. Like, chat only gets you so far. Like, eventually you need high precision interfaces and or multimodal interfaces, and you're not going to use chat or whatever to fly a plane or something like that, right? You need there's a reason that all these expert interfaces exist. I think there's a lot of stuff that's like just a computer science problem, like hallucination. Every year it's going to get 10% better or 20% better. Multimodal is definitely just becoming an expected feature, and which is amazing. It was only maybe 2 years ago that omni models started happening, right? GPT 4.0, and now it's just, of course, your model. You can give it a visual or give it a picture or give it a video. Reasoning is the same thing. 8 months ago it was like a crazy thing, and now it's just everybody does it. I do think I know, and certainly selfishly on my side of the world, you'll continue to see a lot of investment in how do you package and provide knowledge to a model or to an agent in the right way. And then I think similarly, there's a very parallel set of questions about how do you package and provide tools to the agent in a very narrow set of way. You can imagine, like, every enterprise has its variation of the request time off tool. And so how do you provide that interface to your vacation planning agent or something like that? I don't know. So,
what are you telling your kids about AI, or are there any restrictions, or what are you teaching them, or how do you approach the next generation and AI?
I go back and forth in this. And so at a broad level, my wife and I are pretty good about not minimizing electronics with our kids. There's people who have the opposite thing where they say, screw it, let them learn how to code at 5. We've avoided that so far. I do think a basic foundation in computer science, even with AI, is pretty key. Once again, just because we have calculators doesn't mean we tell people not to learn math, not to learn basic arithmetic. So I think basic computer science, same thing. Beyond that, it's a wide world. We'll see what happens.
Well, that's a great note to end on. And thank you so much, Vinod, for entertaining me for
Sure.
an hour.
Yeah.
And great to reconnect. Where can people find you?
Vinod at vinod.com is the easiest way.
Nice. Oh, wow. You got that.
I got that. Yeah.
You should sell emails to other Vinods.
Totally.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Vinod. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Perfect. Talk to you later, Impek.
Great. This was awesome.
If today's episode gave you clarity on enterprise AI, agent automation, or deploying AI at scale, let's make it real. Impekable is a Twilio, 11 Labs, and Google Cloud partner that helps enterprises turn AI ambition into working software. Head to impekable.com or hit the link in the description to connect. Thanks for listening. And if you liked what you heard, hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.